Hey guys, trying to get some brush burned. That's a great big, that stump right there actually is what's left of a giant oak tree. We counted the rings when we cut it. It was like 150 years old, just gigantic oak tree, but unfortunately it died. So we had to get a giant bucket and one of those, like a big giant track hoe kind of deal with a big bucket on it to dig it up. And now it's probably gonna take us a year to burn that thing. But anyway, the point of the video today is I want to show you something that I'm going to try on my Ram 1500. You know, a lot of guys, we buy these half-ton trucks because there's a lot of advantages to a half-ton truck. I use that term loosely, half-ton, because there's really no such thing as a half-ton truck anymore. These half-ton trucks are what 3/4-ton trucks used to be when I was growing up. But anyway, we'll go with that term half-ton, just so you guys know what I'm talking about. They have a lot of advantages. They ride better, they're lightweight, they're fuel efficient, and you can get that 5-foot 7-inch box, which means you can fit them in the standard residential garage. Lots of advantages to them, right? But if you start loading them up pretty heavy, they sag pretty bad. And even if you're within payload, even if you're inside your GVWR, once you start working a half-ton truck, they tend to sag. I'm getting ready to go camping again this weekend. We're gonna go hit another off-road park. So I'll have the enclosed trailer loaded up. I'll have my son's ATV in the back. And this truck sags a little bit with that load on it. It's all well within spec, but the truck just sags because they have soft, cushy suspension on them so that they ride really good. So I was looking for some way to kind of keep this thing from sagging. I want to keep it level when I tow. And I don't really want to fool with airbags because you've got the compressor and the lines, and then issues if you puncture one, and issues if the weather gets really cold. I don't want to fool with all that. So then I thought, well, there's those weight distributing hitches. And honestly, I don't really want to fool with that either. I mean, those aren't a big deal, but they're kind of expensive and you got to set them up and fool with the extra hardware and stuff. So, I really don't want to do that either. So I was thinking, is there something out there maybe that I could just put on the truck and leave it alone? And thought about those Monroe load leveling shocks. I had those on my 04 Ram 1500. I also used them on my 2013 F-150. If you've seen those, it's basically just a shock that has a coil spring mounted on it. It replaces your factory shocks, and when you put a load on the truck, that coil spring takes up some of the slack there, and it basically gives you a little bit better load handling capability. But they don't make those for these new modern Ram 1500s that have the coil spring rear suspension. They don't have them available. So I just started browsing the internet, and I found a couple of options, and I decided to try one of them out. So I'm going to show you this. So it came down to basically a couple of options. Super Springs makes something they call the Sumo Spring, and Timbren makes this one they call the Suspension Enhancement System. They basically are the same thing, although they work a little differently. What you do is you take your rear bump stops out and you replace them with these. And this is fit, it's custom fit to pop up in that provision for your bump stop. You can see they've got a 1-inch spacer on the top that you can remove. You can see there's a bolt there and a nut on the inside, so you can remove that spacer if you need to. Because the idea is once you replace your short bump stop with these longer ones, what you want is about 1 inch of gap between the bottom of this and the axle. So anyway, this is designed to be sort of a progressive spring. And obviously it's longer. You guys have seen these before, so there's not a whole lot to it. You just replace your bump stop with these, and this will make contact with the perch on your axle sooner, which will help you with load carrying capability. So basically when you load up your half-ton truck, it'll sag about 1 inch, and then these will make contact and start helping and start adding some assistance to your coil springs at that point. So basically it gives you the ability to haul and tow with a half-ton truck without sagging. And it's one of those things where once you put it in, it's done. You know, the weather's not going to affect it. You know, sticks and rocks and things are not going to affect it. There's nothing as far as maintenance that you have to do to it. Once you install it, it's done. Set it and forget it. And that's exactly what I was looking for. Now, I will say this one right here, you can see it's branded, well, if the camera will focus, it's branded as Rhino Storm. I got these from Amazon. They use the same part number that the name brand Timberens use. You can see right there for my 2020 Ram 1500 DR 1500 DQ. But these are made in China. So clearly this is a knockoff brand, supposed to be a clone of the Timberens. I did contact Timbren to ask them about this. They said they're aware of it and it doesn't have anything to do with their company. You know, they're not just reselling them or whatever. This is actually a clone, a knockoff version, but they're about $75 a set cheaper. So I thought I would give it a shot. Normally, I don't really do this. I normally stick with the name brands because if you're going to spend the money, you might as well get something you know is going to work right. But anyhow, this is an option for you if you want to save a few bucks. And I'm going to try them out on the Ram. So without yapping anymore, I'm going to briefly show you how they install. It's pretty simple, but I'll show you anyway. And then this weekend, when we go camping, we will be able to test them and see how they handle the load and what the ride quality changes are like and, you know, so on and so forth. So stick with me. So by now, you guys probably know that the Jeep Gladiator and the Ram 1500, well, I don't want to say they share rear suspension, but the rear suspension design is very similar. There are a couple of parts that are shared. I think the lower control arms, maybe the upper arms, are shared between the two. But anyway, very similar designs and suspension. And they make these things for the Jeep Gladiator as well. They might be shaped a little differently, or maybe they attach a little differently, but they do offer these for the Jeep Gladiator as well as the Ram 1500. So if you're somebody who wants a Gladiator and you want to be able to keep it, because you know a lot of those have even less payload than these trucks, this would be a really good option for a Gladiator as well. So FYI. So I got one of them out already, and I'm going to lay this down here so you can see the difference between the factory bump stop and the new one. You can see that this one is about twice as long, which obviously is the reason why it comes in contact with the spring perch a lot sooner and gives you that ability to haul a load. They do have a little bit of squish to them. Now the Timbren branded ones are rated at 8,600 pounds capacity, and they're progressive, so the farther they squish, the more resistance they give you. These, being a Chinese knockoff, don't have any information posted, so I can't tell you what the load rating is, but if they are indeed identical to the Timbrens, then they should be pretty similar in load rating. So let's get the other one done. So when you crawl up under your truck on your back, you can see this is the driver's side. Hey Tucker, back up buddy, I'm trying to shoot a video. My dog's over here trying to give me kisses. Anyway, this is the driver's side, and there's quite a bit of stuff in the middle of the axle there. You got all kinds of brake lines and track bar brackets and everything else, so it's kind of hard to get your hands in there. But basically, if you just grab that bump stop and just grab it and kind of wiggle it around, it'll come right out. They're not in there very tight at all. Now when you go to replace it with this one, you're probably going to want to put some soapy water on there. I'm using WD-40, just something to make it slippery so that it'll pop up in there. And I've also got a crowbar, and I found that once I get it started, I can put the crowbar on the perch of the axle and use that to press it on up in there. The other thing you can do is jack the truck up a little bit and put like a block of wood in there and then let the truck back down, and the weight of the truck will push it on up in there. But just whatever you can come up with to make sure they're seated really well so they don't pop back out again. That's pretty much all there is to it. All right, so honestly, that took me about 30 seconds per side. There's the passenger side one, and can't quite see the driver's side one over there. I'm gonna try to get this camera in an angle so you can see where I've got about 1 inch of gap between the bottom of it and the perch, which is exactly what you want. So, like I said, I just put some WD-40 on the top, pressed it up in there, and then used the crowbar to pop them on up in there. So, very, very simple installation. And now I should be able to do whatever I need to do and want to do with this truck with no sag. All right, so we're setting off down the road, and of course I'm unloaded right now, no trailer, because I just want to see how these things affect ride quality. The idea is that they won't affect ride quality at all. That's what that 1 inch gap is all about. It gives your stock suspension some room to cycle before those things that we just installed make contact. So 90% of your normal driving should be just like it was stock. At least that's the theory anyway. And you know, these roads that I'm on right now are gravel roads. There's some potholes and bumps and ruts, and so far it really does feel completely stock. I mean, I can't feel any difference at all right now. So I can say that so far, of course I'm at low speed right now, haven't got out on the main highway yet, but so far they're doing exactly what they advertise. I can't tell any difference at all. So let me get on out onto the main highway just to be sure, and I'll be back in just a minute. So I'm out on the main road now and been driving for a couple minutes here. And here's what I've noticed. If you hit a big rut in the road, or a big pothole, or a bridge expansion joint, you know, something that makes your suspension cycle quite a bit, then you can feel it. Obviously, it makes contact and you can feel a little bit of a thud, you know, a little bump. It's not harsh, you know, it doesn't jar you or anything. To me, it kind of feels like a 3/4 ton truck, you know, when I ride in a heavy duty pickup. That's sort of what it feels like, except it only happens when you hit those big bumps. You know, otherwise you can't even tell that they're installed. Something that I wonder about, you know, if you have a half-ton truck that has a really soft spring, really low payload, you know, then in theory your cycle, your suspension cycle is going to be more frequent. And just had a guy pull right out in front of me. That was nice. Might ought to check and see if anything's coming first, bud. Anyway, where was I? So if you have a really squishy suspension and it cycles more, then you're probably going to feel these things make contact a little more often. If you have a stiffer half-ton suspension, maybe a max tow package or a heavy-duty payload package or something like that, where the suspension's not cycling as often, then in that case you probably won't make contact with these timbering spring helpers as much, so you're probably not going to feel the thud as often. But the main thing I want to mention is just that it doesn't really affect the ride quality unless you hit a big bump. Like that was a pretty big bridge expansion joint right there. And when I went over that one, I could feel it. But otherwise, so far so good. It's doing exactly what it advertised. I like them so far. Now the real test is going to be when I put the ATV in the back of the truck and my family in here and our camping gear, and then I hook on my enclosed trailer, put my side-by-side and my gear in the enclosed trailer, you know, the whole package. I want to do all of that, and then we'll see how these things perform. So that'll be coming up in a couple of days. So I decided to do to kind of test it in between. You know, yesterday I did a road test with the truck unloaded, no trailer, and tomorrow I'm going to hook up the enclosed trailer, load it completely up, put stuff in the bed of the truck, you know, my full load that I normally haul. And so today I thought I would just do kind of in between. I've got the side-by-side back there on my small utility trailer, so there's nothing in the bed of the truck, and I've got a smaller trailer with just a side-by-side, just to put a little bit of weight on there. And I just want to see how it reacts, because you know, the more weight you put on it, the closer those helper springs are going to get to the axle. And so as you go upward in weight, you're probably going to have a harsher and harsher ride as you go, right? So anyway, I'm out here driving with just a small load, and it feels really good. I looked, and I actually put a tape measure on there. My gap was actually 1.5 inches when the truck was completely unloaded. I had a 1.5 inch gap between the bottom of those springs and the axle. And with this smaller trailer and the side-by-side on there, it went down to about 1/2 inch. So the truck has sagged 1 inch. I've still got just a little bit of space now, So I can feel a little bit more as the suspension cycles. You know, obviously it's making contact with those springs, those rubber springs more often, but it's still not bad. And that's the main thing I wanted to be able to see and tell you guys. You know, with a small load where you're kind of coming on and off and on and off of contact with those springs, it's not bad. It's not harsh. You know, it's not really jarring me around. I'm on a pretty rough road right now, as you can tell. And it doesn't feel bad at all, really. So even with a small load, I think these are going to be really, really nice. And anyway, just wanted to throw that quick update in here. All right, guys, so I got everything hooked up. It's time to go to the off-road park. Got the enclosed trailer hooked up. Got the Wildcat inside. And this is a huge side-by-side, so it stuffs this thing full. Got some camping gear, coolers, a generator, and all that kind of stuff over here. Probably will end up putting a little bit more in the trailer before we're ready to actually leave. Got an ATV in the bed and a cooler. Got some clothes and camping gear inside the truck. So, you know, this is my normal weekend load, and it's a pretty good load for a half-ton truck. If we stand back and kind of get a look at it, you can see that there's still a little bit of sag in the rear because, like I showed you, there's an 1.5 inch gap between the bottom of those rubber springs and the axle. And so that 1.5 inches is going to get taken up normally, just as if the thing was completely stock. So you're going to get a little bit of sag. But then once those rubber springs make contact and start giving you some assistance, then the sag heavily decreases from there. And of course the camera's probably not doing it justice, but you can see, I mean, again, a little bit of sag, but it's nowhere near where it used to be. It's a whole lot better. And because there's less sag back here, the front end isn't lifted up as much. Before I did this, the back would sag so bad that it took a little bit of weight off the front end, and it actually alters the way the truck handles and steers and brakes, especially in a panic situation. So now by keeping this more level, I get more weight, you know, maintained on that front axle, and it just makes everything safer. So that's the whole point in doing this, is to keep the truck more level than it would be and to make it safer to haul a load like this. So I got to finish loading some things up, and we're going to get out of here. Got to check my tire pressures and all that good stuff. And once we get out on the road, I'll give you some ride impressions. But first, let's take a peek underneath here, and I'll show you how these things are working with this load on it. All right, I'm going to do the best job I can do of making this thing focus. But you see how now, with the load on here, I went a little bit too far there. But now those rubber springs are in contact with the perch on the axle. And so that's what gives you, obviously, the functionality of these things. Let's see if I can see this one over here. It's hard to get the camera in position. You can kind of see it there. But anyway, that's what they're supposed to do. So yeah, that's the whole idea. That's what they're supposed to do, is give you normal ride quality when you're unloaded, but then once you get loaded, they come in contact and they give you assistance. So let's head down the road here and see what the ride quality is like. I expect it to be fine. So far, I really love these things. Be back in just a minute. All right, so I'm headed out down the road here, and right off the bat, I can feel a little bit of difference, obviously. I mean, you can tell that the rubber springs are helping to support the load, but I'm kind of surprised because the name brand, remember these are the knockoff Chinese versions, the name brand Timbrens are listed at 8,600 pounds of load capacity. So you would assume that on a half-ton truck they're going to be really stiff once they make contact with the axle and start doing what they do. You know, I would assume they would be really stiff and they would be really hard to compress after that point. This set that I've got on here doesn't seem to be that way at all. It's still, it's really soft. It's kind of squishy. It's not jarring me at all. It's not real harsh at all. I mean, you can tell that they're there, but it seems really soft. And you guys saw what I'm towing. It's not a huge load. I've probably got a little over 4,000 pounds trailer. and maybe 750 on the truck, maybe. I mean, so this is not a huge load by any means. And it just feels kind of soft and squishy, not real harsh like I expected. So with the utility trailer, it kind of felt like a 3/4 ton truck, you know, real firm. With this heavier trailer and this heavier load on it, it's a little bit softer and kind of surprising. It's not what I expected. It's not bad. It actually feels good. It's driving really good, feels good. It's nice to not be jarred, you know, and it's nice to not have that harsh engagement. It's just that that's what I expected and I didn't get it. So the bad thing about these Chinese knockoff versions is that there's no load rating listed on them that I can find. There's no specs or information, no phone number to call to ask questions about them. You're just kind of on your own when you buy them. What you get's what you get. You don't know a whole lot about them, and you're not going to get any customer service. So in retrospect, maybe it would be worth spending the other 75 bucks and getting the name brand Timbrens. I would probably do that if I was doing it over again. But anyhow, feels pretty good, and it's working out great. So I just wanted to kind of show you this because a lot of people they worry about these, worry that maybe they will be really harsh and ruin the ride quality and everything. And I'm happy to report, I mean, I'm on rough roads again, obviously. So you can see me bouncing around here. But the truck is not rough. It doesn't feel rough or harsh at all. So there you go. A really inexpensive and simple option for leveling out your truck when you use it as a truck. Got any questions? So just to reiterate, these do not increase your GVWR. So the gross vehicle weight rating that's stamped on your truck, the payload rating that's stamped on your truck, on your door jamb placard, you still have to abide by that. You know, these don't magically give you more capacity. They just make it easier for your truck to handle the capacity it's got. So anyhow, thanks for watching, guys.